Hello and welcome to another Collector Creations video. In this video I'm doing a Blu-ray review for Imprint's latest release of Secretary, as well as Lionsgate's release of Secretary, because I have both of them now. I bought this last year because I really wanted to see the film. I was honestly probably more interested in the factor of thinking, oh, it's that, sexy BDSM film with James Spader and Maggie Gyllenhaal. That sounded great. And then I watched it, I'm like, actually, it's a really good film. I look at it more as a drama, but it's definitely a, comedy. It's basically like a romantic comedy. But it has so many great, dramatic elements to it. It's a really solid film. I gave it, 4 out of 5 stars when I watched it early May this year. So, yeah, obviously, I was like, do I want to get the Imprint version? And I've just looked through literally every single special feature, bar the commentary tracks, because there's 2 commentaries and the film is already 2 hours long, so I'm like, I don't really want to listen to the commentaries yet. Also, I'm not really big on commentaries most of the time, so if you ever watch any of these Blu-ray reviews, rarely have I ever listened to any of the commentaries, but sometimes I've dabbled. Nevertheless, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about every other little detail. So we're going to start with packaging. I'll focus on the Lionsgate release second over the Imprint one, but obviously there'll be timestamps down below for packaging, for video and audio, which is a very interesting contrast of the 2 releases, and the special features. Again, another interesting contrast. So the Imprint release has the original poster, which looks stunning. Obviously, when I unboxed it, I was looking for the title, and then I realized where it was. It's an iconic poster. It gives you an idea, a thing of, this is what the film's about. Look, it's Maggie Gyllenhaal. She's down on her hands and knees. But, as per usual Imprint tradition, it gives you a little detail on the top, as well as talking about what the film is about, plot, whatever the crap. And then what the special features, as well as all the copyright stuff and all that jazz. It's white, so it's not focusing properly, but that's okay. It is notably 1:78:1, same aspect ratio as the other Blu-ray, but it has LPCM 2.0 stereo rather than a 7.1 mix, which is interesting. I believe it's all regions, it doesn't stipulate, but of course, it's a slipcover release. Limited to 1,500 units. It comes with this alternate artwork on the inside, which is really nice artwork. It's got this kind of comic booky look, and it's kind of like Pulp Fiction in a way, like how that has that Pulp Fiction pulp novel kind of look, and I really like that. It kind of makes it seem more like a raunchy film in a way, and it kind of I kind of dig it. Again, same stuff on the back. So the standard Lionsgate version just has that. It has that same image of Maggie on the top. It has that image of James Spader on the base. It makes it look like he's scared of her sexuality, which, ironically, this scene, he's not actually scared of her for her sexuality. He's scared of her for the factor of her honesty. It's a really strange artwork. I'm not a fan. It's also a thin case rather than the thicker one that Imprint has, and you open it up and you see how there's that recycling sign? Yeah, there ain't much behind that disc with its also generic artwork. I should also show the artwork to the inside of the Lionsgate, of the Imprint one. This does stipulate, again, what the film's about, its special features, and how it's all regions. So, no matter where you are in the world, this is still a playable version. I believe this is the same. I didn't check it on my Region A player. This will be the interesting thing. So the disc art is the same as the main artwork, as you can see there. But, obviously, they went a bit above and beyond with their Imprint release for the sex appeal element, of course, and gave you that image on the inside. I'll take the sleeve out. We all want to look at the inside and look at sexy Maggie Gyllenhaal, and despite, obviously, the sex appeal that she does have in the film, she's much more of a raw, honest character, because she plays someone who has, gone through a lot of awful shit in her life, as well as the fact that she's pretty... It's one of those... she's very suicidal. She's, hurts herself. She literally starts the movie coming out of, basically rehab. Is it even rehab? It doesn't actually stipulate. It doesn't actually stipulate what her character is like in any of the actual stuff on the back. The BDSM kind of S&M part of the film is more of a look of what allows her to be more, like, honest with herself, and it's something that she finds to be more comfortable. Like, she inflicts pain on herself because she hates the world, the relationship she has, her parents, and how abusive they are, and all this kind of stuff, and how she's not prized over her sister, and all these different elements. But then meeting him and becoming his secretary, this is Mr. Grey, that's played by James Spader. This came out before that 50 Shades movie did, and the book, obviously. In fact, the original short story that this is based on came out well before 50 Shades of Grey was even a thought. But, yeah, it's not what you'd think. It's not some really overly raunchy film. It has a raunchy attitude to it, sure. It has sex appeal, sure. It definitely does. But it has a more honest look at that, and how, despite how, again, raunchy some things can be with their S&M values and whatever, sometimes it's just what people find comfort in, hence that's just their sexual attitude and appetite, you know? It's an interesting, like, discussion and examination of this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's cool. Picture and audio-wise, the picture is basically, it's the same transfer. There's no remaster, nothing reevaluated. The benefit of the Imprint release is that it does have a higher bitrate. I had my play info stuff on, and between the scenes it would vary at between 28 to 32 megabits, sometimes peak at 35, and at some scenes it would go as low as 22. So between 22 to 32 isn't that bad. It really depended on the scene and the lighting in particular, because some scenes look a bit more drab and dreary compared to others, which was purposeful because they're meant to represent, like, the kind of atmosphere that she lives in. She's at her parents' house and it just looks dreary and awful, but then she's at the office and it looks all bright and lively. There's a lot of love in that place, and so hence the bitrate goes higher because there's a lot more stuff to process, same as the night scenes and whatnot. So the picture looks good. It looks, I'd say, slightly better than the Lionsgate release. Comparing the two, it just looked a slight bit healthier, but that's, again, one of those little itty-bitty things with the bitrate. Like, you wouldn't really notice it unless it was a proper, like, 2K restoration or something. So obviously this is just the same version that was already available, but it is upticked with that extra disc space stuff, which I do appreciate, because this does seem like a larger disc in contrast to what the Lionsgate release had. Audio-wise, Lionsgate is probably the champion of this, where Imprint is probably the champion in terms of visuals. Lionsgate's version has a 7.1 mix, which you'd be thinking, holy shit, what does this is there car chases and explosions and laser beams and shit? No, most of this surround sound is just for the score, which it is an Angelo Badalamenti score, and I do really like the score, but it doesn't need a 7.1 mix. Even the Blu-ray.com review even was like, it doesn't need this. It doesn't even really need a, 5.1 mix, realistically. Like, it sounds good, sure, it sounds great, but in contrast to the LPCM Stereo 2.0, I gotta be honest, I don't mind either. Like, the 7.1 sounds better because you get more definition, more broad range, especially for the score, but the dialogue and effects don't really change much. It's very much a talky film. It's not a, again, effects-heavy film. There's not really many effects at all. So, it doesn't need that extra uptick. Could this have used a 5.1 mix? I wouldn't have been against it. It would have still balanced out, like, the music and the score, which, again, is mostly the highlight in terms of the audio stuff. But it all sounded crisp and clear and easy to listen to through the speakers. So the 2.0 isn't a bad option, and it doesn't feel like a detriment to the film. It all still balances quite nicely, and you still get that effect and the ambiance from, the surround, from the audio mix, and from the music and the score. So, I don't know. Again, the 7.1 is more spacious and does sound nicer, but the 2.0 isn't a detriment. So I kind of feel like it's on par, because it's like it doesn't need a 7.1 mix, but I feel like it could use a bit more than a 2.0 mix. So it's a tough spot. But then if you had only seen this version, you'd be like, yeah, I don't think it would need a better version. Maybe a 5.1 at the most, realistically. Now, of course, special features. This is the kicker. This is the thing I just spent the past 3 odd hours looking through. Now, when I originally got the Lionsgate release, I watched all the special features because, I was curious about it. I was like, oh, what do they have? They have a writer and director commentary, not bad. I didn't watch it, but not bad. They have a behind-the-scenes featurette, which is about 7 minutes long, which is pretty good, covers the film to a nice degree. It seems pretty formulaic, but it works well enough. And then it has a photo gallery, which just has a couple of images, which not really much to write home about. Some behind-the-scenes stuff, but realistically it's just kind of like screen grabs and whatever, and none of the overly sexy stuff, if that's what you're interested in. Trust me, the one image that's in the inside of this case is sexier than any image on the photo gallery in this. So, if you really care about that kind of stuff. This does have the obvious, English 7.1, master audio, which again, the DTS does sound good. Okay, the DTS is just better in general. This audio mix on this is great. But it has English and Spanish subtitles and English SDH. But outside of that, there's nothing. A commentary, behind the scenes, and a photo gallery. It's very bare bones. And that's where, obviously, Imprint prizes. It is championing this film. It is like, hey, we can't do anything better. Actually, we are. So, yeah, sure. Picture, basically the same, but with a bit more of that, bit more juice with the megabits or whatever the hell it's called. Audio, downgrade, but still fine. It suffices for what the actual style of the film is. Special features, you don't just get one commentary from the writer-director. You also get, what's this? So, yeah, again, writer-director Aaron Wilson, who wrote it, and the director Stephen Shayberg. But you also get an audio commentary by film scholar and editor-at-large of Bright Walls Dark Room, Veronica Fitzpatrick, which is brand new, exclusive to this release. You also get 4 brand new featurettes, all interviews, as well as original cast and crew interviews with actors James Spader, Maggie Gyllenhaal, and the director, which is about 30 odd minutes long. I think 35? I tallied that down. I watched all of this stuff because, again, the previous release didn't have any of these interviews, and the older interviews of the actors and the lead actors and the director are from the original press release, which is nice. One's like an on-set one, which is asking the same questions for each person, and then it's like an actual just before the film launched, but just after like its initial reaction interview. So it's enough. Like you get 12 minutes with James Spader, you get 14 minutes with Maggie Gyllenhaal, and you get 16 minutes with the director. So, not bad. You get some good perspectives on it. The James Spader one's a bit iffy because, again, I don't know. James Spader talking about his characters, he doesn't really seem to be the type to do it well. But Maggie Gyllenhaal's is really interesting, and the director's is very interesting. But then you get an interview with actor Stephen McCatty, who plays her father, Gyllenhaal's father in the film, which is called Finding the Heart in an Imperfect Father, which is 10 minutes long, and it discusses his early notable career options that led him into becoming an actor, including working on a Roger Corman picture. And then he talks about what it was like working on the film and developing his character. Then you have the interview, a magical... It was actually called From Me, But Not Me, actor Stephen McCatty on Finding Heart in an Imperfect Father. But then there is A Magical Oasis, art director Nick Ralbovsky on Building the Stylish Sensual World of Secretary, which is 16 minutes long. And he discusses how he designed the sets, especially the office set, her room, and the secret garden. He also talked about how they organized things so they didn't have a lot of needless trinkets on set, because there's a lot of well, how do we do this, do we do that, all this organizational factors, as well as the troubles that they had during some production days, especially leading up to the final sequence, the secret garden. Then you have Shared Fantasy, producer Andrew Fierberg on making an indie classic, which is 17 minutes long, where he talked about his journey into filmmaking and the difficulty of getting Secretary made due to its subject matter and whether or not it's perceived as a sex film or a comedy. It's a really interesting look at what it's like to get an indie film off the ground from concept to production to release. So, yeah, a lot of interesting information within just that 17 minutes. And then the final one is, using every light, director of photography Steven Feuerberg frames the humanity of Secretary. Yes, Andrew and Stephen are brothers. So in this case, he's the director of photography, and he covers his journey into filmmaking, working on like indie films and low budget stuff in New York, to going to LA and filming with Dean Cundey and eventually Roger Deakins and stuff like that, and how he learnt from them, especially because Roger Deakins had only like just started and wasn't a huge name at the time. This is in the early 80s. And then he discusses how he got into doing Secretary, and basically just how some of the sections were shot and how they decided for this and that. Like the opening single take was a thing the director had come up with like the day before, and they were like, okay, how can this work well? And there's all these ins and outs in terms of technological craft that he discusses. But again, as someone who's interested in cinematography, it's really interesting. So like both of these guys, even the art director, were talking about how like they wanted to get into movies, what should they do? And I should note the director of photography's thing is 22 minutes long. But they all had that emphasis on, they all wanted to get into movie making, and it was basically, yeah, you have to find something that you actually want to do. And so they all worked in different fields before finding their fortes. Again, art director, producer, and director of photography. But as an overall, I think that this is a great release. I think it's a better release than what Lionsgate had originally put out. The transfer is identical, but slightly better in terms of bitrate. The audio is weaker because it's not the DTS 7.1, but at the same time, it doesn't need a DTS 7.1, but I would have liked it to still have at least a 5.1 track, but this 2.0 stereo still works well enough. Like, you can still hear everything well enough, you can still hear the music, it still works, but, yeah, the fault is definitely in the audio, but the special features slams out of the park, especially because it still has all the original stuff, including theatrical trailer and TV spots, whereas the Lionsgate release, the only thing it has unique is a photo gallery, and honestly, despite how nice it looks, it's not a great photo gallery. But this has 2 commentaries, including the same commentary. It has the behind-the-scenes featurette. It has all of the cast and crew interviews that were done originally, because of course, unfortunately, they weren't able to get James Spader or Maggie Gyllenhaal or the director to come back and actually talk about the film. But I think the people who they did get on extra, for the art director, the producer, cinematographer, and even actor Stephen McHattie, I think they're really interesting. The McHattie one's not overtly amazing, but again, it's still interesting to get an actor's perspective on the role and whatever, especially because of how like important his role actually is to the film, despite his lack of screen time. But yeah, I thought all the others were really well done, really informative, really interesting. So yeah, I think that this is, and packaging, oh my god, the packaging of this release is absolutely incredible. So I think if you're looking for a release of Secretary, this is the way to go. Imprint has done a fantastic job. So go ahead, check this film out for yourself, and find the release in stores or import it from outside of Australia. It's an Australian release. Yeah, form your own opinion. I don't know, I don't have like an end tag for these kind of videos yet, so hey, it's a good release. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you guys next time. Adios.